The sound of splintering wood shattered the silence at 12:15 a.m. Marcus Webb jolted awake as his front door crashed inward, the lock mechanisms torn from the frame. Heavy boots thundered across his hardwood floors. Voices shouted commands that overlapped into chaos. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, his heart hammering against his ribs. Three figures in police uniforms burst into his bedroom, flashlights cutting through the darkness like blades. The lead officer, a thick-necked man with sergeant stripes, aimed his weapon directly at Marcus's chest. Two others flanked him, their faces twisted with aggression that went beyond professional duty. Marcus was a 32-year-old software engineer who had spent the last 8 months quietly building something dangerous. To dangerous man. He worked for a tech company downtown, lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom house on Riverside Avenue, and to most people seemed unremarkable. But Marcus had been documenting everything. Every illegal stop in his neighborhood. Every planted evidence case. Every brutality complaint that vanished into administrative black holes. He had recordings, timestamps, witness statements, and financial records that traced protection money from local businesses straight into the pockets of corrupt officers. He kept encrypted backups in 3 separate locations. He had been careful, methodical, patient. But somehow, they had found out. The sergeant stepped forward, his badge reading haze. "Where is it, Webb? Where's the drive?" His voice carried the confidence of a man who believed he operated above consequences. The other 2 officers began tearing through Marcus's belongings, dumping dresser drawers, ripping open his closet. One of them, a younger officer named Garrett, smashed Marcus's laptop against the wall. The screen spider web, but the hard drive was worthless anyway. Everything important lived in the cloud and on devices this man would never find. Marcus kept his hands visible, his voice steady despite the terror climbing his spine. "I don't know what you're talking about. You have a warrant." Hayes laughed, a sound like gravel scraping metal. "You really want to play it that way? You've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Asking questions. Recording conversations. You think you're some kind of hero." The third officer, Torres, pulled Marcus from his bed and shoved him against the wall. Pain exploded across Marcus's shoulder blade. They patted him down roughly, checking for weapons, for phones, for anything that might document this moment. But Marcus's primary phone was already doing its job from the nightstand where he had left it. Screen dark but microphone active. "Check the office," Hayes barked. Garrett disappeared down the hallway. The sound of furniture overturning echoed through the house. Marcus heard his filing cabinet hit the floor, papers scattering. These men were not here to arrest him legally. They were here to erase him and everything he knew. Hayes leaned close, his breath hot against Marcus's face. "You have 2 choices, Webb. Give us everything you have, every file, every recording, every backup, and we walk away. You keep breathing, you keep your job, you forget this ever happened. Or option 2, we find it ourselves after you have a tragic accident resisting arrest. Which sounds better to you?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Marcus had heard stories like this before. He had documented cases where witnesses disappeared, where evidence vanished, where justice died in dark rooms just like this one. But Hayes did not know what Marcus had set in motion the moment that door came crashing down. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had installed a pressure sensor under his bedroom rug, connected wirelessly to a triggering system. The moment his feet hit the floor in the pattern he had practiced, a silent alarm activated. No sound, no visible alert, just data packets flying through the air to specific recipients. Text messages to his lawyer, Sharon Kim, who had been standing by for exactly this scenario. Automated emails to the FBI field office with attached files, timestamps, and his home address. A live audio feed that began streaming to a secure server the moment his phone detected voices matching the stress patterns of a confrontation. Hayes thought he had Marcus cornered. He had no idea the walls were already closing in on him. Instead, within 6 minutes of the break-in, 2 unmarked vehicles rolled to a stop 3 houses down from Marcus's address. Federal agents Rachel Odom and James Chen stepped out, coordinating with 4 honest officers from the state police who had been investigating Hayes' unit for months. They had been waiting for Hayes to make a mistake this big. Marcus's documentation had given them probable cause, but they needed Hayes to cross the line himself. Now he had kicked that line into splinters along with Marcus's front door. The agents moved quickly and quietly, surrounding the house, blocking every exit. Chen radioed for additional units. This had to be airtight. Inside, Garrett returned from the office empty-handed. Nothing. No drives, no devices, nothing physical. Hayes' jaw clenched. Then we take him in. We make him talk. Torres grabbed Marcus's arm, but before they could move, bright lights flooded through every window. A voice boomed through a megaphone, clear and authoritative. This is the FBI. The house is surrounded. Officers inside, drop your weapons and exit with your hands visible. You have 30 seconds to comply. Hayes froze, his face draining of color. Garrett's hand moved toward his radio, but Torres stopped him. They all understood at once. This was not a random patrol. This was a trap, and they had walked straight into it. The standoff lasted 90 seconds that felt like hours. Hayes looked at Marcus, recognition dawning in his eyes. You set us up. Marcus met his gaze without flinching. I documented the truth. You set yourselves up the moment you decided the badge meant you could do anything to anyone. Hayes' hand tightened on his weapon, and for one terrible moment Marcus thought he might actually fire. But Chen's voice cut through again. 10 seconds. Come out peacefully or we come in. The math was simple even for a desperate man. 3 corrupt cops against federal agents and state police with legal authority, body cameras running, and probable cause for arrest. Hayes lowered his weapon. The 3 officers filed out slowly, hands raised, into a perimeter of flashing lights and trained weapons. Marcus followed them out minutes later, escorted by Agent Odom. His neighbors lined the street despite the late hour, watching in silence as Hayes, Garrett, and Torres were handcuffed and placed in separate vehicles. Sharon Kim stood on the sidewalk holding a briefcase full of legal documents. She nodded at Marcus with fierce satisfaction. The evidence Marcus had compiled was already in federal hands, cross-referenced with the FBI's own investigation. Financial records showing $200,000 in illegal payments. Recordings of Hayes ordering subordinates to falsify reports. Testimony from 17 different victims who had been too afraid to speak until Marcus gave them a way to do it safely. 3 more officers would be arrested by morning. The entire precinct corruption ring was unraveling. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in a community center packed with residents from Riverside Avenue and beyond. The district attorney announced formal charges against 12 officers, with more investigations pending. Sharon spoke about systemic reform and civilian oversight boards with real authority. Marcus did not consider himself a hero. He had simply refused to accept that injustice was inevitable. He had documented, organized, and trusted that the truth still mattered when presented to people who would listen. The system was not fixed, not by a long measure, but for the first time in years, people believed it could bend toward justice instead of breaking under corruption. Marcus looked around at faces that carried hope instead of resignation. That midnight raid had been meant to silence him. Instead, it became the moment everything changed. The corrupt officers thought they controlled the narrative. They were wrong. The truth had always been stronger than their threats, and now everyone knew it.